It is 7 o'clock, which means it's time for us to get to making or drawing stuff in Fusion 360. We're gonna do some wing design, I'm calling it, even though I know nothing about wing design. So if you're gonna build an airplane that your life depends on, you should not use this class as a method to build that airplane. But I'm gonna build an airplane that somebody else is gonna fly in. And
so I know to avoid it.
yeah, what we're gonna be flying July 16th here in Milwaukee. So if you want to avoid Milwaukee on July 16th, because a plane that was made here at the Milwaukee Makerspace will hopefully be flying that day. So anyway, let's get into it. We drew a little airfoil a couple weeks ago as a sketching exercise, let's call it. But we're going to start from scratch today. We're going to start with a brand new airfoil using the second method we used. So hopefully the wing that we're going to get closer to is this wing right here. But we're going to start pretty simple. We're going to start with a sketch. So I'm going to start a brand new design here. And in this new design, I'm going to start and make a new component. So in previous classes, we'd kind of just started making sketches. And if we just start making sketches, it makes us a sketch folder here. And then in that sketch folder holds all of our sketches. Components are kind of a level up in a way of organizing things, if that makes sense. So instead of creating a sketch, I'm going to start by creating a new component. Because this drawing is going to eventually have lots of bits in it, and I kind of want to compartmentalize all those bits and have them a little bit more organized. So I'm going to start a new component, and this component is going to be our wing. So eventually all of the bodies and sketches and surfaces that are part of our wing will be in this wing component. And I'm just going to say, okay. So now the next new thing we need to worry about here, or I want to point out, is we've got a little radio button next to this wing component here. And this radio button is something we'll have to pay attention to as we continue our exploration of making this aircraft. As I create new sketches and make new bodies, as we've done in this class before, those new sketches and new bodies will appear inside of the component that I have active. So if I have my wing component active, and I say create a new sketch, it'll make that sketch inside of the sketches folder inside of my wing component. If I have my main document component, as I call it, active, and I create a sketch, it will create that sketch in my outside of my wing component in kind of like my main document component. Is that making sense? Cool. I see nodding faces, so that's a good sign. All right, so I'm going to make my wing component my active component. And I'm going to start by inserting a canvas. So I went out to the internet, which is a series of tubes, and I found this airfoil. So what I did, and I'd encourage you guys to do this at home and here at the Makerspace, if you pull up the Google on your computer and you look up Clark Y airfoil, because we're going to trace over this airfoil. So if you look up Clark Y airfoil, and then for me, the very first link that came up was a website that seems highly reputable. Airfoiltools.com, probably the definitive resource. No need to look any further or do any more research, just like #1 in Google. Can't go wrong, right? So I'm going to click on that, and I just need to save this picture in some way, shape, or form. So I'm going to save it because a trick I found, if I click Save As, it wants to save that whole web page. But I can zoom in here a little bit so it fills up a little bit more of my works by viewing window, let's say, and I can do a print screen. And the image,
Yeah.
I would suggest doing a print screen. So just capture a screenshot. For me, that's Windows print screen. On a Mac, it'll be different if you know how to do a screen capture.
Windows, you can also use the Snipping Tool.
Ah, Harold, can you explain how to use the Snipping Tool for?
Yeah, it's real easy. You just go to your search bar, you type in Snipping Tool.
Hey, look at that.
That's the one.
And then I hit New.
And then you'll drag a box around the thing you want a picture of.
Ooh, I love dragging boxes. It's my second favorite thing to do. Sweet. And then I can just save that?
Yep, and then you can save it. I think it saves automatically to PNG.
Oh.
How did you do that?
But we want to save a JPEG file for sure. So here, I will show you. So I'm going to say no. So in my Windows search bar, I'm going to type in, thank you, Harold. I'm going to type in Snipping Tool here. And then I get this little window that pops up. And then at the top of that window, there's a little new option with a lasso and a scissors. Or a red line and a scissors. And now I get the little once I choose that button, I get the crosshairs, and I can click and drag on the area that I want to snip. And that captures that image for me to then save as. We definitely want to save it as a JPEG. I've not had as good of luck importing PNG files into Fusion, so we're going to save it as Clark Y Airfoil. Cool? Everybody's got an image? Alright, good, perfect. I learned a new thing. This is fantastic. I love learning new things. It's my whole jam. Alright. So now in order to bring that into Fusion, we're going to choose the Insert menu. So if I say Insert, and I want to insert a canvas. And now I'm going to navigate on my computer because I'm going to insert it from my computer. And I'm going to find the picture that I just grabbed, which is my Clark Y Airfoil right here. And I'm going to say Open. And now I've got my canvas window that it has opened up here for us. And I just need to select the face here. This wants me to select which of these three surfaces that I'm gonna place that canvas on. So I've got like my two-dimensional kind of image and I need to place it somewhere in my three-dimensional world. I'm gonna put it on the right side. Seems like a good place to put it because this is the side of my plane. I guess it's a side view of the wing, right? It doesn't really matter a whole lot where you put it. You just need to pick one of those three surfaces. And now once I've clicked my face that I'm placing that on, I get a lot more options. So I've got a little widget out here, and I can move that with these arrows. I can move it up or down. I can scale it. If I hover over this little curved section and I click and drag, it scales that up. And our goal here is just to scale it up to a size where it becomes visible. So I just scale it up to a size that I can see it here. And we don't need to be very precise because we're going to be much more precise in the next step. And once we've got it scaled up so we can see it, I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. We'll wait for everybody to stop frantically clicking while I bark orders at them.
If you didn't have an image already from the internet, how would you make it landscape?
Well, that's a fine question. So I did some Googling on Airfoil Design, and I found a couple of these kind of resources here. So it seems like airfoils are made up of a couple of different, and Mike, you could probably speak to this a little bit more. Mike has got some expertise-ish in this area.
Mine's more generic. If you have GIMP on your computer, like what Carl said, you do a screenshot, which is just like print screen. And then if you have GIMP, you go to GIMP, and from the first file menu, it has create. You can create an image from the clipboard. You just click there, and bang, there is your picture, and you can export it as a JPEG or a PNG or whatever you like. That's how I got that from there.
But I think part of the key, Isabel, is like you have to have you have some sort of initial front radius, and then you have a couple of curves that connect tangentially to this. And my understanding of like aerodynamics, limited as it is that as long as this line here is longer than the line at the bottom, then that's how you create lift on a surface. So because this line up here is longer, the air moving over the top of this wing has to move faster than the air moving under the wing. And because you move the air faster, it's a lower pressure up above, so it creates lift that way. Is that other people's understanding of how lift works? Does that make sense-ish?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are lots of different airfoil shapes. Some of them are flat lines at the bottom, like this one is pretty flat. But like you can see, there's here's that dragonfly wing that somebody was talking about. That's kind of cool. But there's lots of different airfoil shapes, and even this one, the top line is probably a little bit longer than the bottom line. Good question. Okay, cool. So we've got our drawing placed. Good. All right, excellent. So now we can do the hard work of tracing things. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new sketch. So I'll go ahead and click on Create, and then I'll click on Create Sketch. I'm going to create that sketch on the same surface that I placed that canvas on. So I'm going to go ahead. Oh, you know what? I lied. First we need to calibrate this canvas. I got a little ahead of myself. Sorry. Instead of creating a sketch, we're going to open up our Canvases folder. And that Canvases folder will have the file in it that you just put there. And if you right-click on that file that we just placed, the third option from the top is Calibrate. So if I choose that calibrate option, now I've got another crosshair here. And what it wants me to do is place 2 points and then give a measurement between those 2 points. So the points that I'm going to place are right at the very front. So this would be the leading edge of my airfoil. So I'm going to place 1 point at the very leading edge. And then I'll place my second point at the trailing edge here. And now I get a distance measurement. And this distance measurement, I think, is going to be 6 feet, which is 72 inches. And this is just a guess for a decent wing size, because I don't know things. But who says you need to know things in order to make stuff? Knowing things is overrated. You can just look things up. All right, so now we've got our canvas scaled to the correct size. So now we can create a sketch and trace over the top of it. Yeah, go ahead.
For panning, is there a hotkey to switch to that?
You know, I don't think so. It might be if you middle, do you have a mouse?
Yeah.
If you middle mouse button click, that might pan.
There we go, thank you.
Okay, cool. I use a trackpad with CAD, so people make fun of me on the internet, but I don't care.
That's it.
Yeah, so you just have to use the hand tool down here if you're gonna pan. Honestly, I find myself zooming in and zooming out more than I do panning, just because with the trackpad that's a lot easier. So, all right, so now we just have to create that sketch that we were doing initially. So I'll click on Create, and then Create Sketch. I'm gonna place that sketch on the same drawing surface that I put that canvas on, like I was previously mentioning there. And now we're editing our sketch here, right? So if you're new to Fusion, you may notice that all of the tools at the top have changed. So we're now what's known as editing a sketch. So we've got our sketch palette open here. That's a clue that we're editing a sketch. We've also got all the sketch tools, all of our two-dimensional drawing tools here at the top. So right now we're editing this sketch and creating it. And the majority of this work here of tracing, I've been using the Spline Tool because I think that's an easy tool to use. It may not be the best tool to use because the Spline Tool does not hold up well if you want to make changes later. And I learned that when I was making my little initial drawing, my little prep drawing for class. But we're going to use it anyway because it's the only way I could figure out how to make these complicated curves. So to use our Spline Tool, if I just stop moving my mouse, it says, hey, specify the first point. All right. So I'm going to start by specifying the first point at my leading edge here. And then if I move my mouse out and I place one more point on this curve just by clicking, now when I move my mouse, now I can see a kind of a curved edge starting to form here. And this doesn't need to be super exact right now. We want to get it pretty close, but we'll be able to go back and tweak where these points are later. So I try to make these curves or these splines by placing as few control points as possible. So I kind of move my mouse out until the curve starts not following the line I'm trying to trace. And then I walk back a little bit. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Which spline tool did you grab?
I am using the Fit Point Spline Tool. Mostly because I think the Control Point Spline Tool is more difficult to use. Or more difficult to trace a line with, at least. So using this Fit Point Spline Tool just kind of lets me click to place my points, and I just kind of click and place points along my curve. And again, I try to do as few of them as possible. That gets me pretty close with just 4 points. And now to finish this curve, or this spline I should say, if I move my mouse down, I get a little checkbox. And this little checkbox is my finish spline checkbox. And I'm going to go ahead and place the bottom of my wing on here as well. So I'll go ahead and, if I hover over the beginning of my curve here, I can see here I want to make sure I snap and make it make the starting point of this spline at the same point I started my last spline, just so there's a connected line there. And if I move my mouse near my starting point, when I get that little blue box around that end point, it tells me that I'm snapping to that point there. So I'm going to place my bottom curve the same way. I'm going to click and place my second point fairly close, and then I'll move out until I can get to the end of my curve there.
Carl,
Yeah.
what do you do if your spline tool is haunted?
Exorcism. I would recommend exorcism. Let me come take a look. What do you got going on?
I'm trying to get it started, but the damn thing will not go where I want it to.
Yes. So, I have very recently, this is a great question, Mike, and I think I just figured this out today. So, Mike has got a problem where he is zoomed into his sketch like I encourage people to zoom into his sketch. And he's like, hey, I want to place my spline over here. But for some reason, my mouse cursor won't go over here, right? So what's happening is your browser is getting in the way. So this kind of area of your screen that is underneath your browser is kind of like almost unusable. You can click on items in your browser, but you can't really draw behind it. So if you zoom out, so the point that you're trying to click on is not kind of behind your browser, then you will be able to click on anything you want.
Yep.
Cool? All right. Probably another option, I bet if I choose to hide my browser, yeah, if I hide my browser, I can also click on it over here. And you hide the browser just with, it's not showing up on the screen up there, but there's a little triangle, some double triangles over here that you can click on to hide the browser or show the browser. Once you have those splines in place, when you're done using the spline tool to place splines, you can hit the escape key, and now I can use these control points and I can drag them around a little bit so I get a little bit more accurate curve. I can take these endpoints and I can tweak them a little bit so the curve a little bit more closely follows the line that I was trying to trace. And again, there are many books full of things that I do not know about airfoil design. But sometimes the best way to learn things is just by jumping in, maybe? Or at least the best way to crash an airplane is just by jumping in and drawing stuff. And certainly crashing is what is going to happen on July 16th. So, I mean, at some point, we're either going to crash 2 feet in or 200 feet in. Somewhere in that range. Cool. Harold, do you follow me at home? Are you good?
Yep, we'll keep it up.
Sweet. You guys are good here? Mike?
If you make too many points, if you overshoot with your spline tool before you can find the check mark box? Can you go back and erase those, or just say the hell with it?
If I go too far, that is a good question. Let me try it. Let's try going too far. I'm gonna delete one of my splines here, and if I accidentally, here I'm having that problem again. If I accidentally go too far, because the spline tool is just so fun to use, if I go way over here, and then I hit the checkbox, I wonder, can I use my trim tool? I can use my trim tool. So if you've gone too far, like I've gone here where I made this line that's too far, I can, from the modify menu, I can choose this trim option here. And now, like, a lot of times I advocate against using the trim tool, because using the trim tool will modify the line that you're using, and that's really only the case if it's a dimensioned line. Because this line has no dimension, I fully support your use of the trim tool. That was a good shit.
If you have an open curve and you hit trim, you just wiped out your whole spline.
I found that if you click on a single point along the line there and just tap the delete key, it'll just delete that whole point.
Can't you hit the undo key for one?
Oh yeah, I think it's gonna undo the whole.
If you're
It undoes my whole
in the
spline.
middle of what you were doing, then doing undo, you have to undo half of your work before you can undo the one area that you want to undo.
You have to do what?
If you're using the undo key,
Right.
you have to go like halfway through what you've done to fix the mistake you made halfway through. If you just select the point that's halfway through, you can just delete
Just
that
delete
one.
it, just delete it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Saves you from redo a lot of things.
And now that I've got a line that's looking good there. All right, cool. So now that we've got a shape that is fairly close to the shape I'm trying to make here. That one's actually pretty bad. That's close enough. Let's call it close enough for government work. Now, I want to create some geometry inside of this shape. So I want to create some circular cutouts inside of here. And before I do that, I kind of want to give myself some guide so I don't make those cutouts too big. So what I'm going to choose to do is, from the modify menu, I'm going to find this offset option. So modify, and then offset, and the sketch curves that I'm going to select to offset is that spline that I just made. So if I click on that spline that represents the outer edge of my airfoil, and I just drag this inward, I'm going to choose to make it 2 inches. However, maybe that's too much, maybe that's not enough. But 2 inches is what I'm going with. And I'm going to say enter. Now these lines here are just guides that I'm going to use to place some circular cutouts. So I don't actually need that geometry to be a solid line. In fact, it'll help me later on if it's not a solid line. So you'll notice right now, if I hover over my individual segments, I've got kind of 2 distinct fully enclosed areas. I've got this inner area and this outer area. And that'll cause some problems later when I'll have to select more things when I go to extrude this shape. So what I can do is, if I highlight these lines that I just made as offsets, I can change their line type. So I'm going to make them construction lines. If you were with us last week, which was, I don't know, construction line nightmare, maybe that's what we'll call that class. But if we make these into construction lines, I can highlight them and either click on the construction line button in my sketch palette, or if you're into keyboard shortcuts, you can hit the X key. And the X key will also make those into construction lines. So now you'll notice as I hover over this, it's no longer two distinct shapes. It's kind of one shape that I can highlight at one time.
So how big did you make this again?
I made that offset 2 inches.
No, I mean, the whole distance the way.
The whole distance is 6 feet.
6 feet?
Yes. 72 inches, yeah.
Actually, I think I may have missed it when we were doing the calibrating.
Yeah.
Did the was there like a window that popped up that indicated where we punched in the 6 feet?
There, well, kind of. So if I right click on the canvas and say Calibrate, then what you have to do is place one point and then move your mouse to an opposite edge and place that other point. And then it gives you that measurement that you can enter in here. And you can see I was very precise about my 72-inch measurement. And then that scales up that image to a known dimension that you have. Alright, let me go back into editing this sketch. So the last thing that we need to do here on our sketch is to make our circular cutouts here. So I'm going to choose to do that from the Create menu. There is an option for a 2-point circle. And this 2-point circle option will just allow me, if I zoom in a little bit here, I'll click and place the first edge of my circle on that top construction line, and then I'll move my mouse down and I'll place the second point of my circle on the bottom construction line, and I'll just kind of go through from front to back. I'm going to leave a little bit of gap here between these next ones, so there's a little bit of a gap here, and that'll be, we'll use that little bit of gap later. So I'm just going to place a couple of circles front to back, and then just be conscious up here in the front. I suppose we could have done that first, but it's more fun to have to change things later. You learn things better when you do them twice. And in the back here, I'm just going to leave a little bit of gap here too. So at the front, near the front, and then near the back, I'm going to leave a little bit more of a gap between my circles. And that's going to be to place.
What's the purpose of the circles?
So the circles is just to have some cutout. So just to lose a little bit of weight and not lose a lot of structure.
Structural strength.
Yeah. So, yeah, a lot of the wings that I've seen employ this method. So, and it's easy to do. So that's why I'm doing it. Because I'm lazy.
No need to reinvent the wing.
Right. Exactly. And, you know, those little spaces that I was mentioning right now are for the little gaps here for our spars. Our front and rear spars will get kind of notched in there, so it's just kind of a way to construct everything together. All right.
Now, those circles being constrained to the construction lines, can you drag them back and forth?
I can. However, they're not really constrained to the construction lines. The unfortunate thing about using a spline is normally the constraint that would happen between this circle and this line would be a tangent constraint, and you can't use the tangent constraint on a spline, unfortunately. I would love to constrain this sketch fully, because it just makes my soul happy when I see a lot of black lines. But you can't really constrain things to a spline. And you know, when I was doing the preparation for this class, I was trying to figure out how to draw them with a bunch of curves that I could then alter later if I wanted to, because I like to make things parametric. But I was not having success doing that, so we're using the spline tool. All right, cool. So the last thing that I need to do here is to make some little notches for our spars here. So I'm just going to do that with the rectangle tool. So if I click on create and then come down to rectangle, and then I'll choose the 2-point rectangle here. If I click and place the first point of my rectangle, like I'm going to make the notch right in here-ish. So if I click to place the first point of my rectangle outside of my wing, and then I'm going to come down here to approximately the center line. So the center line of this wing is this green line that runs through it here. And I'm not going to specify a height, but I am going to specify a width. And that width is just going to be 2 inches. So 2 inches, I'm going to hit enter. And now I've got that first little cutout there. And I'm going to do the same thing at the back. So my front spar is going to be here. My rear spar. If I go up and find another 2-point rectangle option, and I'll do that same trick. I guess not really a trick, that same procedure, where I make a rectangle that is 2 inches wide, and however tall it needs to be so it approximately reaches the center line of my spar. That line there is the chord length, for those of you paying attention to wing geometry at home.
I don't have a green line showing up on mine.
You just want to get pretty close to the middle.
Oh.
Really just the goal is to be pretty close to the middle, and that way we'll have an equal amount of strength between our spar and our airfoil at that joint, if that makes sense. All right.
So after you fit this curve to your spline, you offset lines by 2 inches and turn them into construction lines?
Exactly.
So I go,
All right, cool. Good? Happiness? Mike, how you doing? You're working intently.
The construction lines are telling me to take a long walk off a short fuse when it comes to setting up a tangent.
So the tangent does not work on a construction line, or on a spline.
Well, I'm not using
Yeah, you
that
won't-
spline. Oh,
That was the plan with you.
that was,
I think you got touch rate.
yes, I do.
Cutouts?
So that would be rotated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so you
Okay.
can't really make them.
I was using, okay, from the spline, I use the offset tool to make a 2-inch offset inside. And I tried setting my circles tangent to that, and it just said heat shift.
Yeah, it won't let you do that.
Okay, so you just freehanded and by guess and by gosh?
Yeah, and I used the 2-point circle, and that let me get closer to freehanding it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. All right. So, once we've got our... Actually, let me kind of do a check it. Harold, I'm going to do a little walk around the room here and just check, make sure, see how people are doing. Do you have any questions before I do my little walk around?
No.
All right,
All
cool.
good.
Nice.
I'll do it at home.
All right, good. Excellent. Nice wing. Cool. Making circles. All right.
So I need to turn off my canvas, and then how many, you want me to just draw several center point circles?
Well, so I chose to do 2-point circles. So in the create menu,
Should I turn off my
you
canvas?
can. Yeah, you can if you want to. It's not necessary, but you certainly can.
I've been able to do like
So I think it's easiest to do a 2-point circle here.
Oh,
just
like
you
top
can-
to bottom?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, like
Carl,
4 or
who's gonna
5?
be the test pilot on this airplane?
I would like to volunteer Isabel to be the test pilot right now. But if anybody would like to draw the short straw on that, I'm sure that she would be happy to give it to you.
Who's the lightest member of Makerspace?
I don't know.
Faith, probably.
I don't know.
That would be the logical choice.
All right, cool. Are we good for moving on?
Just move on.
Just move on. All right, cool.
I'm used to being lost.
So I'm gonna click Finish Sketch here,
What are you trying to do?
and believe it or not, we're pretty close. So I've got a sketch now that I can extrude. So we can make a
Can I ask
3D.
one question?
Oh yeah,
Sorry.
sure.
How'd you cut those? You made a 2-inch box and you want, just review that for me.
I
real
did,
quick.
yeah, for sure. Do. So our cutouts here are just, they're 2-point rectangles, and I'll go ahead and delete one of them. Do I go this way? Nope. I go this way. This is it's a dangerous operation that I'm doing here. All right, cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and from my create menu, I'll choose the 2-point rectangle option.
Is there a specific coefficient you're trying to reach for this wing design? Are we gonna?
I'm going to go with 42. Is that a coefficient that sounds good to you?
I get it.
Thank you, Harold. Thank you. So
a lot of things.
Harold is is a fellow sci-fi nerd. So
Just got into galaxy style?
exactly, yeah. All right, yeah. So I'm just making a rectangle, and I'm specifying a width of 2 inches, but I'm not going to specify a height. And I'm just going to make it so it goes from outside of the wing to roughly the center of my wing. And after the fact, if this isn't quite in the right place, I can drag this around. That's one of the benefits. I don't want to call not having a fully constrained sketch a benefit, but maybe it's an advantage, I guess. You can just click and drag and move things around. Because we're just making shit up as we go.
Well, if you want to constrain it, you could do it off the date on.
I don't know what that word means.
Your plane.
So the rectangle I could probably constrain.
Right.
You're right. Yeah.
You could probably do all your circles that way too, actually.
Are the circles constrained?
No, they are not, like at all. And again, part of this bothers me, but I'm choosing to ignore that right now. Yeah, because we're just trying to remove some weight here. You know, whether this is a 5 1/8 inch circle or a 5 1/4 inch circle, probably doesn't matter a whole lot for the kind of engineering that we're doing.
Weight, so how it would balance out.
Totally, but like the difference between this circle being 5 1/4 And 5 1/8 is probably not going to make a measurable distance in the amount of less crashing that we do. That's my guess.
Make a phone call to Boeing and not.
Right.
Theory.
All right, so I'm going to say finish sketch. Now that I've got that all placed, and I'm going to, from the create menu, choose to extrude this sketch. So if I choose this extrude option, and I pick that volume, that area there that is going to be my wing spar, and I give it an extrude amount of 2 inches, because I think we're going to make this out of a 2-inch pink foam. If I choose that distance of 2 inches and say OK, there we've made our first spar. And a very nice spar it is, if I do say so myself.
After you drew the rectangles.
So to make the rectangle, or to cut them out, I just didn't choose them in my extrusion. So because I didn't pick them in my extrusion, then it just didn't, it made those little cutouts for me. So because I like to stay organized, I'm going to name the sketch. So I'm going to call this my Clark Y airfoil. And I've got a body up here. This is called body 1. And I'm going to go ahead and name that too, just because I think it's beneficial in the long run to stay nice and organized. So I'm going to call this my airfoil. And to name things, you just got to click on them and then pause and click a second time. All right, excellent.
So your sketch is my airfoil, or what do you call your?
I called the sketch the Clark Y airfoil and the body the airfoil. However, you can name them the same thing if you want to. Fusion will totally let you do that. So because my sketches live in my sketches folder, I won't ever get confused about which airfoil is which airfoil if I call them the same thing. And in fact, often I do that. You know, and this is probably a good practice to get in, because if you're like, hey, I'm looking for the sketch that I made this body from, if I call them the same thing, then it's easy to keep track of which sketch made which body. All right, so I'm going to hide my airfoil sketch because I don't need to see that anymore. I'm going to hide my canvas as well because I don't really need to see that anymore either. And I think maybe the last thing that we're going to get to here, let's try to make our first spar. So the spar, we're going to have 2 of them, a front and a rear spar. And the spars are the things that connect each of the airfoils to each other. So they're these long bits that span the length of the wing and allow connection points between your airfoils here.
How thick did you extrude
I made
that?
it 2 inches.
Thank you.
So in order to draw our spar, I'm going to make a construction plan, or I'm going to choose to make another sketch, right? And I'm going to make that sketch on this surface right here. So, you know, in addition to creating sketches, when I say create and create sketch, in addition to those 3 drawing surfaces that we have initially, I can also draw on any flat surface. So if I choose to create my sketch on this surface right here, if I click there, and place that sketch on that surface. What I'd really like to do is to have some geometry, like there already exists some geometry on my wing here that I would like to use when I'm making my spar. So I'd like to make my spar as tall as my wing is there. So I'd like to know my bottom and my top heights here. So what I can do to find that information is from the Create menu. If I come down to Project Include, and then over to Intersect. So what this option does is it says, hey, here's my two-dimensional drawing surface. At what points do this three-dimensional object intersect with that two-dimensional plane? Is that making sense? So I'll choose Project and then Intersect. And
something selected?
we will now.
I'm not seeing project from.
Oh, in Create?
Yeah.
Are you editing a sketch?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so in the Create menu, if you come down to Project Include. No? Yeah, there you go. That's weird.
I don't know what you put.
Click on Create again. I don't know. Oh, try click and create and then create sketch.
Oh, create sketch?
Yeah, so you create a sketch, and now if you click on your create menu, now there we go. Now, and then you want to intersect, that intersect option there. So if I choose this intersect option, the selection filter that I'm going to choose here probably defaults to specified entities, and I want to select an intersection of an entire body. So I'm going to choose this bodies as my selection filter. And now I can click on the body here in my drawing view, or I can click on the body in my browser, in my bodies folder. So either one works, either here in my drawing view. And as I hover over this, you can see I've got like a red outline that's highlighting there. So that is the geometry that is being drawn in that intersection there. And now that I've got one item selected, I'll just say OK. And you can see I've got some purple lines there. Now we can use those purple lines, and I think the way that I'm going to choose to draw this, I'm going to go ahead and turn off my body right now, just because I think that that'll be a little bit more illustrative of what we got going on. So I'm just going to hide my body. And I want to make my wing expand out a lot in one way and only a little bit in the other direction. So, and I'd like to have the top and bottom, like I said, be the same width as the height of my airfoil at that point. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to make a 2-point rectangle, and I'm going to purposefully do a bad job of doing all those things that I just mentioned. So I'm going to place the starting point of my 2-point rectangle off to the side there, and I'm going to make it much bigger than what my airfoil is supposed to be right now. And the only dimension that I'm going to specify here is the length of my wing. So our wings are 12 feet long on each side. So I'm going to type in 144. And then, like I said, I'm just going to do a really terrible job of making those match up, because I'm going to force them into matching up after the fact using constraints. So I'm going to click to place the height of my line there. And you can see I've got a really big, long rectangle that is totally not in the right spot. Now, using some constraints, I'm going to make those lines appear in the right spot. So from the constraints menu, I'm going to go ahead and choose this coincident constraint. And I'm going to choose to make this top line, if I click on that, I'm going to choose to make it coincident to one of my top points. So that makes that snap down into place. I'm going to do that same operation to the bottom of my wing here. So I've still got my coincident constraint active here. So I'll click on the bottom line of my wing spar, and I'll make that coincident to one of the bottom points that I projected over from my wing. So now we've got a good height, and the last thing that we want to do here is to give a distance between where my wings begin and the start of my spar here. So we need to have some amount of space in which we're going to connect these two wings to whatever kind of body we're going to have here. So I'm going to specify a distance between this line and this line, and I can do that by clicking on the Create menu and choosing Sketch Dimension. And now what I can do is to place a dimension by clicking on this outside line and then moving my mouse over and clicking on one of my projected lines. And now if I move my mouse up, now I can place that dimension. And right now this dimension says it's 11.469957. I can just type in a dimension that I want that to be, and it will go ahead and snap to that dimension. Now I'm done making that sketch. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the Finish Sketch button. Before I turn my airfoil body back on, I'm going to go ahead and extrude this wing spar. So from the Create menu. Oh yeah.
Question.
Yeah, sure.
You got the little cut in your airfoil, but it's not in the spar. Are we going to do that later?
We are, yes.
All right.
Yeah. So we're going to choose to extrude this wing spar here, and I'm going to extrude out all 4 parts of it. So I have these little bits that are projected, and I also have the parts on either side there. I'm going to extrude it out a distance of 2 inches, making it a new body. And I'm going to say OK. I'm going to go ahead and name that body. This is my front spar. And now I'm going to turn on my first airfoil again. Well, I got a sketch to name too. This is my front spar sketch. And I'll go ahead and I'll hide that sketch as well. We're so close to wing. I'm just going to go for another 5 minutes if you guys don't mind. So, in order to duplicate this spar, or not this spar, in order to duplicate that airfoil over and over again, we can use the pattern tool. So, from the create menu, I can come down to pattern and then over to rectangular pattern.
So what are we duplicating, the spar or the airfoil?
We're going to duplicate the airfoil. Whenever this message comes up, I always choose capture position. I'm not sure why you would want to revert to a position or what it would be reverting to, but I always choose to capture. The type of pattern that we're going to make is a bodies type. So we're going to make a pattern of a body. And the direction, I suppose we could select the body first. So I can either select the airfoil here in my bodies folder, or I can click on the body here in my drawing view. Either one works just fine. I'm going to choose to click on the body in my bodies folder. The direction that we're making this in is if I choose one of the lines at the top or bottom of my spar that span my wingspan there, that will be the right direction. That'll orient me the right way. And now I got a little blue arrow, and if I just click and drag on that, it's going to drag out a little space there. Now, my distance type here is set to spacing, and right now I'm setting these every 25 inches, and I can just turn up the number until it gets to the end there. If I bet if I make this 26, yeah, if I make it 26 inches and I place 6 of them, one of them ends up really nicely placed at the end of my wing there. Following? You got a number of airfoils going on?
How many do you want?
I've got 6 of them, and they're spaced out at a distance of 26 inches. Which seems like a good amount for a airfoil wing. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know things. But we can always, this part is parametric, so we can add more airfoils later if we find out through testing that we need to have more density or not. I'm going to say OK here. Now, the very last thing we're going to do in this class is we have these nice notches. We have notches in our wing airfoils, but we don't have notches in our spar. So the very last thing we're going to do here is to create those notches. And the way we're going to choose to do that, counterintuitively, is with the Combine tool. So from the Modify menu, there is an option called Combine. And I say counterintuitively because we're actually going to use the Combine tool in order to cut. So the default operation for Combine is Join. If we change that default operation from Join to Cut, the target body is the thing we're cutting away from. So we're cutting away from our front spar. So I can either click on it here in my drawing view, or I can click on it in the bodies folder of my browser here. The tool bodies are the things that are doing the cutting. So the things that are doing our cutting are all of our airfoils. Pro tip, if you will have to select a whole bunch of something and they happen to be all in a row in your bodies folder in your browser, you can click on the first item and then you can hold down the shift key and you can click on the last item and it will select all of the items in between there.
It's target body. Target body is what?
The target body is our front spar, is our long spar.
And the tool bodies are
The tool bodies are those airfoils.
hold and shift.
You actually don't need to, yeah, you can shift, if you want to select all of them at once in your bodies folder, you can click on the top one and then shift and hold all of them. You can also just click on them each individually. You don't need to hold down a shift or anything. We're doing a cut, and very crucially, this is the most important checkbox you'll see in all the class. We want to keep those tools. So we don't want to get rid of the tools after we do this cut operation. We're going to keep them. And I'm just going to say OK. And now if I just hide one of my airfoils, we can see we've got that little cutaway going on there. So that's going to wrap us up for this class. Next class, we'll draw the back airfoil, so we'll go over part of this operation again. And then hopefully we'll get to like putting the covering on the outside, or maybe like drawing the little end cap on the wing. We'll kind of, you know, go a little bit further with our little airplane next week. Thanks everybody for coming.
You said you had a YouTube channel with all of this?
I do have a YouTube channel with all this. So if you go to if you go to YouTube and look up Maker ADD, you will find that YouTube channel. In fact, here, let me pull it up here.
Carl,
Yeah.
do you know there is an NACA airfoil database?
Found it, thank you.
I do not know that, but it sounds like something I would like. Here's my YouTube channel with videos. It's all Model Monday stuff. It's an archive, so if you're interested in previous, there's lots of great YouTubers who do, you know, much other better content, let's say. But the real benefit of this class is coming in person or joining us online, so you can ask questions. And until next week, we'll see ya. Harold, did you have any questions? Perfect.
So I'll see you next time.
All right, we'll see you next week.
So are you going to